All right, let's dive right in. We're going to be talking about the body's silent and visible command center, the endocrine system. I mean, think about it. This is the intricate web of hormones that's basically running the show behind the scenes, dictating your mood, your energy, and how you handle stress. So, what happens when that messaging system goes haywire? When the signals get scrambled, or maybe they get way too loud, or they just get lost completely? Well, that's exactly where endocrine disorders come into play. And today, we're going to visually map out how this communication breakdown happens, step by step. Okay, so before we can break things, we've got to understand how they're supposed to work when everything's running smoothly, right? The best way to think about the endocrine system is like a top-down chain of command, and it all starts right up in the brain. And smack dab in the middle of all this, you've got the pituitary gland. Seriously, they call it the master gland for a really good reason. It takes its orders directly from the hypothalamus, and then it acts like an air traffic controller, sending out these stimulating hormones to all the target glands throughout the body, telling them exactly what to do. This really breaks down that chain of command for us. Let's just use the stress response as a perfect example. Step 1, the hypothalamus sends out a signal. Step 2, the pituitary gland gets that message and shoots out a hormone called ACTH. And step 3, that ACTH travels all the way down to the adrenal glands and tells them, hey, time to produce cortisol. It's a super clear top-down process. But how does the body know when to hit the brakes? And that is where this next idea comes in. And honestly, if you get this one concept, you've pretty much got the whole system figured out. It's all about the feedback loop. This is the brilliant little mechanism that keeps everything in perfect balance. The idea is actually super simple if you think about it like a thermostat in your house. When the room gets warm enough, the thermostat senses it and tells the furnace to shut off. The body does the exact same thing. When cortisol levels in your blood get high enough, that cortisol itself sends a signal back up to the brain that says, okay, we're good. You can stop sending the turn on message now. It's this beautiful, self-regulating system. Okay, so now for the fun part. What happens when we break that thermostat? We're going to start with a condition where there's way too much of a hormone. Let's trace the pathophysiology of Cushing's disease. And a lot of the time with Cushing's disease, the first domino to fall is a tiny, benign tumor, right there on the master gland itself, the pituitary. And the problem is, this tumor just does not listen to the body's signals. So let's trace this out. First, the tumor just starts pumping out way too much ACTH, just constantly. Second, the adrenal glands, which are getting this relentless signal, they go into total overdrive. And third, what you get is a massive, unregulated flood of cortisol. And here's the absolute key. Step 4. All that high cortisol tries to tell the pituitary to stop, but the tumor doesn't care. The thermostat is broken. It's just stuck on full blast. And all that chaos on the inside? Well, it starts to show up on the outside. This hormonal flood leads to these really classic physical signs. You see things like truncal obesity, where the arms and legs are thin but the torso is heavy, a rounded moon face, and that characteristic buffalo hump of fat on the upper back. The internal problem becomes very externally visible. All right, so we've seen what happens with way too much cortisol. Now, let's just flip the script entirely. What happens when the system fails in the opposite direction and you don't have nearly enough? Well, that brings us to Addison's disease. Now here's the twist. In primary Addison's, the problem isn't in the brain. The command center, the hypothalamus and pituitary, they're working perfectly. The issue is with the final factory, the adrenal gland itself. It's been damaged, a lot of times by the body's own immune system, and it just can't produce cortisol anymore. So you can see how this cascade plays out, right? The adrenal gland just stops working. The pituitary, sensing those dangerously low cortisol levels, starts screaming for more by pumping out tons and tons of ACTH. But it doesn't matter. The adrenal gland is broken. It can't respond no matter how loud the signal gets. The result is a profound and very dangerous hormone deficiency. Okay, now this next part is where the rubber meets the road, especially if you're studying for an exam. We're going to connect the internal hormone levels directly to what you see in the patient. Understanding the why is the absolute key to remembering the what. This chart right here is just gold. It lays everything out, side by side, and just look at the patterns. They're direct opposites. In Cushing's, with too much cortisol, you get high blood sugar, high blood pressure. In Addison's, with too little, you get the exact reverse, low blood sugar, low blood pressure. You see that? It's like a mirror image of dysfunction, and it just continues right down the list. Seeing it like this makes the connections impossible to forget. So let's get into the why behind those numbers. In Cushing's, all that extra cortisol is telling the liver to just make more and more glucose, which leads to hyperglycemia. It also has an effect that makes the body hold onto salt and water, which is what drives up the blood pressure. And in Addison's, it's the complete opposite. No cortisol means not enough glucose is being made, causing hypoglycemia, and a lack of aldosterone means the body loses salt and water, leading straight to dehydration and hypotension. See, every single symptom has a direct physiological cause. Okay, so how do we actually figure this stuff out in a real patient? How do clinicians pinpoint exactly where the breakdown is happening? Well, they have a whole toolkit of specific diagnostic tests designed to do just that. So one of the really key tools for diagnosing Cushing's is this thing called the dexamethasone suppression test. Dexamethasone is basically just a really powerful synthetic cortisol. Now, in a healthy person, if you give them this drug, it should trigger that negative feedback loop and tell their body to stop making its own cortisol. But in someone with Cushing's, that tumor just doesn't listen. Cortisol levels stay high, which basically confirms that the thermostat is broken. So as we wrap this up, are you starting to see the pattern here? Here's the one big idea to take away from all of this. Whether we're talking about too much hormone or too little, almost every single endocrine disorder is really just a story about a broken feedback loop. It's a communication breakdown. And if you can really grasp that one core principle, you've got the key to understanding the why behind all of these conditions.